We are all proud of our home. At least I think we should be. As most of you are aware, I am originally from the state of Alabama. We lovingly refer to that as Sweet Home, Alabama. You know me. You know I'm proud of my college football team. I also can tell you pretty much a good place to eat in any corner of the state. And we're home to some people that have made a real big impact in the world. And the county where I grew up, Butler County, Alabama, that's the home of Hank Williams Sr., who sang country music when it was really country music. We're also in Alabama, the home of Hank Aaron, the one that I still consider the home run king of baseball. But Arkansas is my home now, and in fact, my children have grown up here. Now, I have brought them up right in the nurture and admonition of the Lord of teaching them how to say roll tide, but I guess I really appreciate those of you that have taught them how to call the hogs, because that is part of living in the natural state. We know how to call the hogs. It's a beautiful state. It's the natural state. We have rolling hills here in South Arkansas, but as we go north, we have some of those beautiful scenery as we go up the Ozarks. We're home to some of the largest diamonds in the world in that crater of diamonds in Murfreesboro. And one of the great things about Arkansas is you are never far away from a good fishing hole or a place to hunt. This really is the natural state. But there's something interesting, whether it's my original home of Alabama or whether it's Arkansas. You can usually tell that someone is a stranger there. They're new or they're just passing through. In Alabama, if you go into a restaurant and you sit down and you order unsweet tea, they might look at you and say, "You're not from around here, are you?" If they dare ask you who your college football team is and you say, "I really don't like college football," they're going to know that you're not from around Alabama. Then I think about the state of Arkansas. And I think about that if you come here and someone offers you an opportunity to come and sit down and have some deer steak, and you look back and you say, "Well, I really don't care for deer steak." And you're going to look at them and you say, "You're not from around here, are you?" If you find somebody that really doesn't care for hunting or fishing, you're going to look at them and you're going to say, "Wow, you really are a stranger here." Or if you don't like Hope watermelons. You see, there's certain things that it's really clear that this is home for us. And strangers really do stand out. Now, we're in the book of 1 Peter, and we're looking at this idea of strangers and standing out in a different way. In fact, a couple of weeks ago when we started this series, I introduced this theme to you from 1 Peter. I would like to bring it before you again today. 1 Peter is a letter written by the Apostle Peter to Christian exiles undergoing fiery trials, giving them a reason for a living hope. We want to keep that theme before us. Now, one of the things that we've been talking about and building up to for today is how do we have the courage to stand out? We're exiles. Another translation talks about that we're Christian strangers. As strangers in the world today, how do we as Christians stand out? How can we grow in that courage? And that's a question that we want to answer today. Picking up in the text in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. Remember, when we talk about being a stranger, there's really two ideas of being a stranger. You're in a new place or you're a new person. And in 1 Peter, there's possibilities and realities that both of these ideas apply. Peter says in the first couple of verses he's writing to a group of scattered people. They've been scattered, and so we know that there may be some that are in new places, but we definitely know this: they're new people. They've been born again. They've been born into a relationship with Jesus Christ, finding forgiveness of their sins and being made right with God. And so as Peter is writing to this group, he is hoping to instill courage in them to stand out. Let's get to our text this morning. We're in 1 Peter chapter 1, beginning in verse 3. It's there that Peter says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In His great mercy, He has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time." And so we look at this text and we want to talk about how we can stand out. Now I keep using that phrase. Do you remember this? This is where we left last week. We talked about different ways that Christians are engaging culture even today. There are some Christians that are just pulling back. It's like we're just looking for that cave. We're looking for that bomb shelter almost, if you will. Other Christians are fighting back. Several of these are frightening, if you will, especially this idea where we just want to fit in. But our goal and what we want to place an emphasis on in our study today is how to stand out as a child of God, how to stand out as a Christian. So how do we do that? I want to give you at least 4 ideas today. The first one is this, is that in growing in courage is that we realize this understanding that we are born into a living hope. Now we have talked a lot over the last several months that we're living in a day and age where people are losing hope. When we put hope in things of this world, it becomes easy to lose hope. I like this idea, this quote, if I can share this with you. "We will not live as strangers, not for long, without hope." We will not live as strangers for long without hope. And so what is it about this hope? What is it that changes who we are, and how does it help us stand out? Well, I can think of a couple of ways really of where that stands out. First of all, let's look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. It's there that the Apostle Paul writes, "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again. And so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in Him." What does that tell us? It tells us that as Christians, we grieve differently. If you don't believe that, then pay attention as we have opportunities, and then they will, as life moves on. We have opportunities to go to funerals. And as we do so, you can just tell a difference between the funeral of a Christian versus a non-Christian. Now, do we miss our Christian brothers and sisters when they pass away? Yes, we do. But have you noticed the songs we sing? We sing about heaven. We sing about reunion. We sing about rejoicing. We as Christians grieve differently. Why? Because we have a living hope. Christians grieve differently, but this hope also helps us forgive differently. Man, I think back just a little over a year ago, it was in a Dallas courtroom. And it was the trial of Amber Guyger. She was the lady that was accused of killing Botham Jean. And she walked into his apartment, and his life was taken that night. And in the Dallas courtroom, she was sentenced to time in prison. But Botham's brother, Brant Jean, took the witness stand and left the world jaw-dropped. And he did so with this phrase. He said, "If you are truly sorry, I know I can speak for myself. I forgive you. Now, he went on to tell her this. I think this was neat. He said, I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that Botham would want you to do. Friends, here's the deal. We have been forgiven by Jesus, and that gives us a new hope, a living hope. And so we're different people, and we stand out because of that hope. We grieve differently, and we forgive differently. Now, I think there are a lot of other things that stand out about the life of a Christian, but I'll just tell you that these are two that should be near the top of the list because we are different people. Now, here's the thing. When we stand out in that way, the world is going to lean in because they're going to want to know what's different about us. And we need to be prepared to answer that. In fact, Peter would tell us later in this very letter, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. He says, but in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. Man, don't you love that? Don't you love here Peter is? He's saying that you're going to stand out. The world's going to notice that something's different. They're going to ask you about the hope that you have. And so you tell them about Jesus. Now, when you do that, make sure you do that in a way that draws them closer to Christ rather than turns them off of Christ. Church of 2020, did we hear that? We need to live in such a way. We live with this living hope. And the way that we act, the way that we live, the way that we conduct ourselves, it has the world leaning in because they know there's something different about us. And the way that we respond to their questions has everything to do about whether it draws them closer to Christ or whether it pushes them farther away. So when we answer, when we give this reason for the hope that we have, we do so, Peter would challenge us with gentleness and respect. Friends, we have a living hope. We have been born into a living hope. But there's a second reason that we can grow in courage, and it's because our inheritance is in place. Our inheritance is in place. What's Peter talking about? He's saying, you've got a home in heaven waiting for you. It's just like Jesus told His disciples, where He says, I go to prepare a place for you, and I'll come back to take you to be with me. Our inheritance is in place. Now I need to ask you a question. And I mean this in all seriousness. This is a difficult question. When was the last time that you greatly rejoiced in the inheritance awaiting you? When was the last time that we greatly rejoiced over what was awaiting us? You see, here's the thing that I think. We all long to hear the words, well done. Now, on Sunday, we talk about that. We know exactly what that means. But as we leave here and as we go about our week, I want to suggest to you that we are a people who long to hear the phrase, well done. We want to hear that in our daily life, whether it's children longing for parents or coaches. I think about a child that's playing t-ball, and he gets up to bat, and he swings with all of his might, and the ball goes into the outfield, and he runs around the bases, and he's coming home, and he's so excited about that. And where is he looking? He's looking at his parents. He's looking at his grandparents. He's looking at his coaches because he wants to see them erupt in applause and say, well done. I'm proud of you. You see, we long to hear that. Now, as we grow up, we long to hear well done. And that's whether it's from friends, it's whether it's from employers. But we long to hear that. We want people to acknowledge us, to encourage us. And so here's where we need to be careful. If we aren't listening and waiting and longing for well done from the Lord, if we lose sight of our inheritance, then we are likely to compromise. We're likely to compromise who we are just so that we can have somebody laugh at our joke, even if it's at the expense of another person. Even if it means that we have to take shortcuts in order to achieve success at the job so that we can hear "well done." You see, if we don't remain focused on the fact that our inheritance is in heaven, we long to hear "well done" from the Lord. In the book of Genesis, there is a story, it's a great illustration of this, where it talks about somebody that forgot the importance of his inheritance. It's the story of those twins, Jacob and Esau. Remember, Esau was the older. And to be the oldest in the house meant that there were special privileges. He would receive a special inheritance over his brother. Now, Esau came in one day and he was hungry, and Jacob had been cooking stew. And I don't know if the stew just smelled that good or if Esau was just that hungry, but do you remember what Esau said? He said, "Give me some of that stew." And Jacob responded by saying, I'll trade you a bowl of this stew for your birthright." And next thing you know, what happened? Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of stew. And so later, when he went to receive that inheritance from his father, that special blessing, it was no longer his because he had compromised and he had walked away from that inheritance. Now, when we turn to the New Testament, to the book of Hebrews, chapter 12 and verse 15, Scripture talks about that particular moment. Hebrews 12 says, "See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance right as the oldest son. Afterward, as you know, when he wanted to inherit his blessing, he was rejected. Even though he sought the blessing with tears, he could not change what he had done." All right, so here's the big lesson for us. I feel like I need to leave this up for a while so that it can soak in. The big lesson for us, friends, would be this: don't give up what you want most for what you want now. You see, that's just what Esau missed. He gave up what he wanted most for what he wanted now. And so our challenge, again, I want to repeat this one more time. Do not give up what you want most for what you want now. All right, let's move forward. We have a few more verses to cover today. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 6. "All of this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer griefs in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." All right, so here's our big lesson for there. Things that are proven genuine are going to go through trials. We will find out as we go through these trials, we will find out what is of greater worth. Now, I'm reminded about those old Ford commercials. If you remember this, they would take a Ford truck, and the big thing about whichever truck it was, they want to take that and basically hook it up to a mountain and move it. And man, this truck can move anything. It's tough. It's tried and tested. It's proven. What would they say? It's Ford tough. Degree deodorant is another example of that. Degree deodorant has its advertising campaign that really focuses on the whole idea is that, man, the more tense the moment gets, the more troubled your day becomes. That's when this deodorant really kicks in. because it is proven and it will withstand that difficult time, that fiery trial. Now, that's products. What we really need to talk about is some relationships. Man, I don't ever wish trouble on anyone's marriage or in their family. I definitely would tell you that of my family. But having said that, I also know this, that through almost 19 years of marriage, the times that Angie and I have grown most in our relationships with one another has been through difficult times. It's not been through the times of smooth sailing. It's been through those difficult moments, whether it was money is tight or a child was sick or there's some other type of situation that's going on. That's when we trust each other more. That's when we lean on each other more. That's when we grow in our relationship. And the whole point of this passage in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7 is that when we go through those difficult times, that's when our faith is going to be proven of greater worth. We'll find out just how genuine that faith is. And the more that we lean on God, the more that we trust in Him, the more that our faith grows in Him, that's when our relationship with the Lord is going to grow even more. Those tough times make us stronger in our relationship with Jesus Christ. One more point. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 8. It's there that Scripture tells us, though you have not seen Him, you love Him. And even though you do not see Him now, you believe in Him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Inexpressible joy. That's what we have as we grow in our relationship with the Lord. It's an inexpressible and glorious joy. Now, I think about this story. It was a young man in his 20s. He went to his preacher. And the question that he had for him is, he said, do we really allow someone that we can't even see to have a say into how we live our lives? I think that's an interesting question. Do we really want to have something we can't even see and we're going to let Him tell us how we live our lives? In Christianity, the answer to that is yes. Exactly. Our faith is in God. And what we have found out as we have gone through these fiery trials is that we find out, you know what? We find out that our faith in God grows. We find out that God is exactly who He says He is. Now, let's look down at 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 18. For you know that it was not with perishable things, such as silver or gold, that you were redeemed from the empty way of life, handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. Friends, we don't see Jesus now. But by faith, we know that Jesus lived on earth. We believe that He lived, that He died on the cross, was buried in the tomb, and on the third day was risen from the dead. By faith, we believe that He has ascended to heaven. He sits at the right hand of the throne of God. By faith, we believe that He has laid out a path of life for us, that even in those difficult moments of life, we can lean on Him. And why is that? Why? Because we have a living hope. Why can we grow in this confidence? To live in the way of Christ, to follow the way, the truth, and the life? Because we know that there's an inheritance that awaits us. We have found out as we have trusted God in these difficult times of our life that, you know what? This relationship with God is of greater worth than anything else. And we have also found out that when we live the way that the Lord calls us to live in His holy word, that we will live an inexpressible and glorious joy. Now, I want to ask you this. Are we experiencing that? Are we experiencing this hope? Are we living knowing that this inheritance is in front of us? Do we realize and are we living that this faith is of greater worth than anything else? And Is our life, are our lives being described as an inexpressible and glorious joy? My question for us, friends, is this, is where is God in the midst of our lives? Where is our relationship with Jesus in the midst of our lives, even today? And there was a preacher, he went home, and boy, it had been a really hard day, and really had been just even kind of a hard season for him. He began to pour out his problems to his wife. He just felt overwhelmed with all the commitments and appointments, the expectations that people had of him at that particular time. He and his wife had just found out that some friends of theirs, a real close couple, they were getting a divorce. And it had left them discouraged. Preacher had actually been sick for a little while, and he was having a difficult time just kind of getting back to 100%. There was some tension at church, and then for him, Sunday's just around the corner, which means that there are lessons that have to be prepared. And so he's going on, and he's just rattling all of these things off, and his wife's being very patient and giving him some time to work through that. But then she stopped him, and she just asked him this one question. She asked, is God in this anywhere? Now that's a great question to ask. When we think about the struggles that we are facing today, when we think about the pandemic that is before us, friends, I want to ask you this. As we work through that struggle, is God in this anywhere? As we think about we're dealing with this national election, which again is just reminding us of how divided we are as a country. For us as Christians, we have an opportunity to stand out. Is God in this anywhere? You may be having struggles in your marriage or in your family, at the workplace or with friends. I would ask you this, as we strive to stand out, is God in this anywhere? Because if He's not, He certainly should be. And what we find out, that when we put our trust in God, our faith in God, what we will find is those very things that we've talked about. We will be reminded that we have this living hope. Man, as Christians, we long for that, don't we? We will be reminded of the inheritance that awaits us. We find out as we go through these difficult times that our faith is of greater worth. This relationship with God of greater worth than anything else. And friends, there ought to be something different about our lives, causing us to stand out, that leaves before us an inexpressible and a glorious joy because of our relationship with Jesus Christ.